30 years of marriage, and all she got was a hole full of water. The mine had been flooded since 1987, 37 years sitting dark under a mountain nobody wanted. Her ex-husband's lawyer called it a generous settlement. Dot Henshaw called it the only thing left. Dot Henshaw stood at the rusted railing of her father's flooded mine shaft with both hands braced on iron so corroded it left orange dust on her palms. The brass compass sat in her left jacket pocket, cold against her hip through the lining. She could feel it, the way you feel a tooth that's about to go. Constant, specific, impossible to ignore. Below her, black water caught the last of the afternoon light and threw it back as something oily and indifferent. 6 feet down, maybe 8. The kind of water that doesn't reflect your face. It just swallows it. Here's what 30 years with Gerald Henshaw amounted to, and I want you to do this math with me because the numbers are the whole story. Jerry, good old Jerry with his gold wire rim aviators and his corduroy sport coat and that gold wristwatch he never stopped rotating on his wrist, like a man constantly checking whether time had given him permission to leave. Jerry kept the house in Lexington. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, paid off 9 years ago. He kept the savings account, $214,000. He kept the truck. He kept the retirement fund she'd contributed to for 22 years. And his lawyer, a guy named Kendrick who wore loafers without socks in January, stood in front of a family court judge and argued that the Harlan County property was a generous concession. 11 acres and a mine shaft nobody had touched since 1987. Generous. Dot's lawyer called it unconscionable. The judge called it equitable. Jerry sat there checking his watch with that pale hazel stare, shifting his weight from foot to foot behind the table like a man waiting for a bus. And when the ruling came down, he didn't even look at her, just rotated his wrist one more time and nodded like somebody had confirmed a restaurant reservation. Dot signed without argument, not because she agreed, not because she was beaten, because Dorothy Henshaw had spent 30 years learning that arguing with Jerry was like arguing with weather. It happened to you, and then it was done, and the only thing left was to figure out what you had. What she had was this: $2,341 in a checking account at a regional bank in Lexington, a duffel bag of clothes, her father's brass compass on a leather cord, and 11 acres of scrub timber on the shoulder of Pine Mountain in Harlan County, Kentucky, with a gravel road that dead-ended at a collapsed cattle gate and a flooded mine shaft ringed by iron railing that hadn't been painted since Reagan's first term. Now watch this number, $2,341. First month's lot rent on the rusted single-wide trailer already squatting on the property, because that's what was there. A 1978 model single-wide that some cousin or uncle or specter of the Henshaw line had dragged up the mountain decades ago and left like a dog tied to a post. That lot rent was $620, owed to the county for the land use permit. Gas from Lexington to Harlan County, 170 miles of winding 2-lane blacktop through the Daniel Boone National Forest, cost her $89, because the rental she was driving drank fuel like it had a grudge. Groceries at the Save-A-Lot in Harlan, bread, peanut butter, crackers, instant coffee, a gallon of water because she didn't trust the well yet, $34. You subtract all that from $23.41 and you get $15.98, $1,598. That's not a savings account. That's a countdown. She drove up that gravel road in late October with the rentals down because the rentals' heat didn't work, and the air smelled like cold rock and leaf rot and something sharper underneath. Old coal dust, maybe, baked into the mountain itself. The cattle gate was down, half buried in wild raspberry cane. She drove over it. The trailer sat in a clearing about 200 yards from the mine shaft, listing slightly to the east on cinder blocks that had sunk unevenly into the red clay. Vinyl siding gone gray-green with mildew, one window patched with cardboard and packing tape, a propane tank on the north side, scratched and dented but not empty. Inside was about what you'd expect. Carpet rotted through to the subfloor in the hallway, pulled up and rolled against one wall by somebody who'd started a project and quit. A kitchen the size of a parking space with a propane stove, a steel sink with a single working tap, and a counter made of laminate peeling at every seam. A bedroom with a bare mattress she wouldn't touch, a bathroom with a toilet that flushed, slowly, reluctantly, like it was doing her a personal favor, and a shower stall with a curtain so stiff with mildew it crackled when she pushed it aside. But the roof didn't leak in the middle, she checked, and the propane stove clicked once, failed, clicked twice, and caught with a blue ring of flame that threw heat against her outstretched hands. She stood there for a full minute with her palms over that burner, her silver-gray hair falling loose from its ponytail, the faded green elastic barely holding, her pale blue eyes fixed on the flame like it was the first honest thing she'd seen in months. The compass was her father's, Carl Henshaw. That was nearly everything she knew about him, the name and the compass, and the fact that he'd worked these mountains his whole life and died in 1989 when Dot was 27. They hadn't spoken in 4 years by then because Jerry didn't like him. Jerry said Carl was a dead end, said the man had nothing to offer and less to show for it, said the mineral rights were gone, lost in some dispute Dot was never told the details of, and that holding on to a relationship with a broke coal miner in Harlan County was sentimental and, his favorite word, impractical. So she let go. And Carl died. And all she had left was a dented brass compass that didn't point true north anymore, but still felt like it was pointing somewhere. She ate peanut butter on crackers standing at the kitchen counter, drank instant coffee that tasted like dust but was hot, set her duffel on the floor of the bedroom because the mattress was not an option, pulled her olive green field jacket tight around her shoulders, and sat on the front step of the trailer as the light bled out of the sky over Pine Mountain. That's when she heard it. A low, thin whine, not quite a bark, not quite a cry, something in between, something patient. A dog sat beside the mineshaft railing, gray-muzzled, thin through the ribs, burrs knotted deep into the rough coat along his shoulders and haunches. An Appalachian shepherd, male, old enough that his hips had that careful stiffness to them. He didn't approach. He didn't wag. He just sat there in the dusk, watching the trailer door with brown eyes that had been watching it for longer than tonight. Dot filled a bowl with water from the kitchen tap and set it on the ground beside half a sleeve of saltine crackers. Then she went back inside and closed the door. Through the window, she watched him wait, 5 minutes, 10, before he walked to the bowl with that measured, deliberate gait and drank. He ate the crackers one at a time, crunching softly in the dark. She named him Wick, because the propane stove had reminded her of lamp wicks, the way the flame caught on the second try, reluctant but real. And because something about that dog sitting beside a flooded mine shaft at dusk, patient and quiet and refusing to leave, looked exactly like a wick that hadn't been lit yet, but hadn't gone out either. She found him there at first light. Wick. That thin, gray-muzzled shepherd with burrs still knotted into his coat, curled on the trailer's front step like he'd been posted there by somebody who forgot to relieve him. His chin rested on his paws, and his eyes were open, and he was facing the mine shaft. Not the road, not the tree line, the mine shaft, like a sentry who knew exactly what he was guarding. Dot stood in the trailer doorway in her boots and her cream thermal Henley, the olive field jacket already on because she'd slept in it. The morning was cold enough to see her breath. October in the Blue Ridge doesn't ask permission, it just arrives, and you deal with it. She looked at the dog looked at the mine shaft. Neither of them said a word, which was fine, because Dot had spent most of her adult life in conversations that worked better that way. She stepped over him carefully. He didn't flinch. His tail moved once against the metal step, a single, slow thump, and then he was still again. The property in daylight was a different animal than the property at dusk. What had looked like shadow and suggestion the night before was now sharp and specific and honestly kind of brutal. The single-wide sat on a cleared pad of gravel and packed red clay, its aluminum siding oxidized to a dull, chalky white. Beyond it, maybe 40 yards uphill through scrub oak and wiregrass, the mine shaft. And listen, when I say mine shaft, I don't mean a hole in the ground with some boards over it. This was engineered. Somebody had lined this thing with cut stone, mortared tight, 8 feet across, perfectly circular. An iron railing bolted into concrete footings ran around the perimeter. Not decorative, functional, the kind of railing you grab when the ground is wet and the drop is forever. A rusted hand-crank winch was still bolted to a crossbeam that spanned the opening, its cable hanging slack into the dark. The whole assembly looked like it had been built by a man who expected it to outlast him. It had. Dot walked the perimeter slowly, her scuffed brown work boots grinding on loose stone. She gripped the railing. The iron was cold enough to ache. She leaned over and looked down. Black water. Perfectly still. Not a ripple, not a reflection, just black, like looking into something that had decided a long time ago it wasn't going to show you anything until it was good and ready. She picked up a stone from the ground. Limestone, about the size of a golf ball. Held it over the edge. Let it go. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Splash. 45 feet, give or take. 45 feet of water standing in solid rock, and whatever was at the bottom had been sitting there since before Dot's marriage, before her divorce, before Gerald Henshaw told her she was worth exactly what a court said she was worth, and not a penny more. She was still standing at the railing when the truck came up the road. A battered green Ford, old enough to vote, its paint sun-faded to the color of a lima bean. It climbed the gravel track slow and deliberate, like the man driving it had done this drive 1,000 times and saw no reason to rush the 1,001st. The engine cut. The door opened with a creak that echoed off the ridge. He got out slowly. Stocky, barrel-chested, white hair cropped close under a faded navy ball cap with no logo. A red and black buffalo plaid flannel over a white undershirt, brown duck canvas work pants, steel-toe tan boots. And there it was, the red bandana, folded neat, tucked in his left back pocket like a signature. Walt Creech didn't introduce himself, didn't wave, didn't smile. He walked to where Dot was standing, looked at the mine shaft, then looked at her with gray-green eyes set deep beneath heavy white brows. "You Carl's girl?" She nodded. He looked at the mine shaft again, then back at her. The broad, flat nose, the wide jaw, the faint birthmark on the right side of his neck just above his collar, all of it perfectly still, while something moved behind his eyes. "Your daddy told me somebody'd come back for this place. Took 37 years, but here you are." That was it. He didn't explain, didn't elaborate, didn't wait for questions. He walked back to the truck, pulled a thermos of coffee and a brown paper bag off the bench seat, set them on the trailer step next to Wick, who sniffed the bag once and went back to his post, and drove away. The truck disappeared around the first switchback, and the sound of its engine faded into the trees like it had never been there at all. 2 ham biscuits in the bag, still warm. Dot ate one standing up, gave half the other to Wick, poured coffee from the thermos into the cap and drank it black. It was good coffee, strong, not bitter, the kind made by someone who'd been making the same pot for 50 years and had stopped thinking about it. She went back inside. The trailer's kitchen was a ruin of mouse-chewed curtains and warped laminate, but the drawers still opened. She'd gone through them the night before by flashlight and found nothing but rust and silverware and a desiccated rubber band ball. But daylight is honest in ways that flashlight isn't. She pulled the top drawer all the way out this time, and underneath the mouse-chewed newspaper lining the bottom, folded once, was a piece of paper. Her hands knew what it was before her eyes confirmed it. The cramped block letters, the careful engineering precision of the lines. She recognized the handwriting from the one birthday card she still had, the card she kept in the duffel bag pocket so it wouldn't bend, the card that said, "Happy Birthday, Dot," in letters so square they looked printed, signed, "Love, Dad," in the same hand. A diagram, hand-drawn, the mine shaft in cross-section, shaft depth, 62 feet, waterline marked with a wavy horizontal stroke, and the note, 45 feet as of Jan 87. And at the very bottom, below the water, below the sediment, a small rectangle drawn with deliberate care. Inside it, 2 words, Chamber B, sealed. Below the rectangle, in different ink, bluer, newer, maybe written on a different day or a different year, her father had written 5 words. For Dot. When she's ready. Her throat went tight. The tortoiseshell reading glasses on their beaded chains swung against her chest as she pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes until the pressure steadied her. Here's the thing about a flooded mine shaft. You can't just look down and see what's at the bottom. You can't send a camera. You can't reach. You have to pump 45 feet of water out of solid rock, and that takes a submersible pump you can't afford and time nobody's offering you. Dot had $1,598 and a diagram drawn by a dead man. And she was ready. She called 3 equipment rental places from the cracked phone she kept charged off the truck battery. The cheapest submersible pump capable of moving that volume ran $185 per week. A generator to run it, $140 per week. Diesel fuel on top of that. $325 a week before she ate, before she bought gas, before anything. At those rates, she had maybe 3 weeks before she was broke. Not metaphorically broke, mathematically broke. 0.00 broke. She pinned the diagram to the wall above the stove with a thumbtack, sat at the kitchen table, wrapped both hands around the thermos cap of Walt Creech's coffee, and stared at her father's handwriting until the coffee went cold. The dented brass compass sat in her left jacket pocket, warm against her palm through the canvas. Outside, Wick hadn't moved from the step. Dot stood at the mine shaft railing and looked down into the black water. Somewhere beneath 37 years of groundwater, her father left something. She didn't know what, but the compass in her pocket was warm against her palm, and for the first time in 30 years, she had nowhere else to be. Walt shows up the next morning with a battered 4-inch submersible pump and a diesel generator on a flatbed trailer. He backs it up to the mine shaft without a word. No phone call, no text, no arrangement. Just the rumble of a diesel engine at 7 in the morning and the crunch of tires on gravel. And there's Walt Creech climbing out of his truck in that red and black buffalo plaid, faded navy ball cap pulled low, reaching for the red bandana in his left back pocket to wipe his hands before he's even started working. The man moves like every motion costs money, and he's not wasting a cent of it. Dot meets him at the shaft with coffee and a tin cup. She's already got her field jacket buttoned against the mountain chill, the dented brass compass pressing its familiar weight against her left hip through the canvas pocket. Her silver-gray hair is pulled back tight, the faded green elastic holding it off her neck. She watches Walt unstrap the pump from the trailer bed and lower it to the ground with a grunt. "What do I owe you for this?" Walt doesn't look up. He's threading the discharge hose onto the pump fitting, his thick, weathered hands working the coupling like they've done it 10,000 times. Those gray-green eyes stay fixed on the work. "Your daddy kept my furnace running 3 winters when I couldn't pay for oil. You don't owe me a damn thing." 9 words. He says them the way you'd say the sky is blue. Then he shows her how to prime the pump, set the discharge line to run downhill away from the shaft, and check the diesel level on the generator. Takes maybe 20 minutes. He points once at the fuel gauge, taps it with a blunt finger, says, "Don't let it run dry or you'll burn the injector." Then he gets back in his truck and leaves. That's Walt. You'll get used to it. The pump goes in that afternoon. Dot lowers it on a rope down into the black water, and when she hits the switch on the generator, the whole shaft seems to shudder and then settle into a steady mechanical heartbeat. Water starts pouring from the discharge hose, brown at first, then clearing to a cold mineral gray. She marks the water level with a weighted line and a knot system, 45 feet on day 1. Now here's where the math starts tightening like a fist. Diesel costs money. $23 a day to keep that generator running. Dot's sitting on $1,598 after the property taxes and the supplies she's already bought. She does the numbers at the trailer's kitchen table every night, the way you'd count bullets in a siege. Groceries run $6 a day. Rice, canned beans, a jar of peanut butter that lasts 4 days if she's careful. She tries to leave cash in Walt's truck for the pump rental, $185 folded under his floor mat. He finds it. He puts it back on her trailer step. She puts it back in his truck. This goes on for 3 days until she tucks it so deep under his bench seat he doesn't find it for a week. Small victories. Day 3, the water level reads 38 feet. Day 5, 31. Day 7, 22. Every morning, Dot walks from the trailer to the shaft with her flashlight and her knotted line, and every morning the number drops. $207 gone to diesel by then. She's at $1,102 and falling. And she's not alone at the shaft anymore. Wick follows her. Every single morning. That old shepherd with the clouded left eye and the gray muzzle pads along behind her, like he's been doing this walk his whole life. He doesn't bark. He doesn't play. He lies down on the concrete footing next to the shaft while the pump runs its steady rhythm, and he watches her lower the measuring line with those calm amber eyes. Patient, present, the way only an old animal can be, the way something waits when it knows exactly what it's waiting for. Walt confirmed it later. Wick showed up after Carl Henshaw died and never left the property. 20-some years of waiting at a mine shaft for a man who wasn't coming back. I'll let you sit with that. Now, the same week the pump starts running, a silver SUV comes up the gravel road. Travis Ridley steps out like he's arriving at a country club. Charcoal wool overcoat, slate blue dress shirt open at the collar, polished black Oxfords that have no business on this mountain. That single deep dimple on his right cheek when he smiles, and brother, does he smile. He's got the slim black leather portfolio tucked under his left arm like it's part of his body. He's heard the Henshaw parcel is occupied again. Of course he has. A mineral rights developer out of Knoxville, the kind of guy who tracks county deed transfers the way a hawk tracks field mice. He sits at Dot's kitchen table in that cramped little trailer and lays out his pitch like he's doing her the biggest favor of her life. His company would lease the mineral rights, just the mineral rights, he's careful to say, for $4,200 per year, plus a 3% royalty on any extraction. He calls it found money for land that isn't producing. He slides the paperwork across the table with those open palms, all warmth and reason, like a man who genuinely cannot understand why anyone would say no to free cash. And here's what makes Travis Ridley dangerous. The offer actually makes sense. If you're sitting on $1,102 and counting backwards, $4,200 a year sounds like oxygen. Dot listens to the whole pitch. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't argue. When he finishes, she looks at him with those pale blue eyes over the tortoiseshell half-moons and says 5 words. The mine's not for lease. Travis smiles wider. That dimple deepens. Think about it. I'll leave my card. The card sits on the kitchen table like a dare. Dot doesn't touch it. The pump keeps running. Day 9. The water level has dropped 31 feet. Dot can see the shaft walls now, hand-cut stone, timber bracing, iron bolts sunk deep into the rock by hands that knew exactly what they were doing. Her father's hands. She gets on her knees at the rim, wick pressed warm against her thigh, and shines her flashlight straight down into the retreating dark. And at the edge of the water line, something catches the beam. The top of a steel doorframe, bolted into the rock wall at the 58-foot mark. Heavy gauge, industrial, still sealed, still intact. Chamber B is real. 2 more days. That's what she told herself, sitting on the trailer step at dusk with wick pressed warm against her thigh, both of them staring at the mine shaft like it owed them something. The steel door was 4 feet below the current water line. 2 more days of pumping and it would be clear. But 2 days is a long time when your propane is running low and your mind won't stop doing math. 2 a.m. The trailer kitchen. Dot sat at the table with her hands flat on the surface, the propane heater clicking its slow, dying rhythm in the corner. Her checking account had $847 in it. She knew the number exactly because she'd checked it 3 times since midnight, each time hoping the digits might rearrange themselves into something that didn't feel like a countdown. They didn't. They never do. Travis Ridley's card sat next to the salt shaker. crisp white stock, embossed lettering, that slim black leather portfolio energy radiating off a rectangle of cardboard no bigger than a playing card. She picked up her phone. His number was right there in the recent calls. She'd saved it without meaning to, the way you save a number you know you're going to need when things get bad enough. And here's the thing that made it dangerous. $4,200 a year was not a fortune. It was not life-changing money. It was lot rent, propane through winter, food that wasn't crackers and peanut butter. Maybe fixing the trailer's hot water so she could stop boiling pots on the stove like it was 1840. It was a ordinary, sensible, humiliating amount of money, and it would solve everything. She stared at that card for a long time. Wick watched her from the doorway, not begging, not whining, just watching, the way old dogs do when they know something is being decided. Then Dot's eyes drifted to the wall above the sink, the diagram, her father's hand, that block letter inscription she'd traced with her fingertips so many times the paper had gone soft at the edges. For Dot, when she's ready. She put the phone down. She put the card in the junk drawer, under a screwdriver and a book of matches from a gas station that probably didn't exist anymore. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. She sat there with the dented brass compass turning slowly in her palm, and she waited for morning. Day 11. The water cleared the door. Walt showed up at 7 with a rope ladder, a cutting torch, and a thermos of coffee so strong it could have dissolved a nail. He didn't ask if she was nervous. He rigged the ladder to the timber bracing at the shaft mouth, tested every rung by hanging his full, stocky weight from it, then stepped back and folded his thick arms across that red and black buffalo plaid. "I'll be topside," he said. "You holler, I pull." That was it. No speech, no warnings. He trusted her to know what she was doing, and if she didn't, he trusted her to yell. Dot descended. The shaft was cold in a way that had nothing to do with weather. It was the cold of stone that hadn't seen sunlight in decades, cold that lived in the rock itself. The walls were slick with mineral runoff, and the air smelled of iron, old stone, and something faintly like machine oil, as if the mountain itself had been working down here in the dark. Her flashlight beam cut a white line through 62 feet of hand-cut stone. Her boots hit the bottom, and the water was ankle-deep, silty, reluctant to leave. The steel door was right there, welded on 3 sides. Her father hadn't just closed this door, he'd sealed it like a submarine hatch. Walt lowered the cutting torch on a rope. Dot pulled her safety glasses down. The tortoiseshell half-moons swapped for a pair of dark welding goggles, and she lit the flame. 4 hours. That's how long it took to cut through 3 sides of weld bead laid by a man who clearly did not believe in doing things halfway. The torch threw blue-white light against the stone walls, turning the shaft into something between a cathedral and a furnace. Her arms shook, her shoulders burned, sweat ran down her neck into the collar of the cream thermal Henley, and she did not stop. Every 20 minutes, Walt's voice came down from above, not asking if she was okay, just a low, steady, "Still here," that meant, "I'm not going anywhere." When the last weld broke, the sound was like a held breath releasing. The door swung inward, and behind it, listen to me, behind it was not a cave, not a hole, not a forgotten storage closet. It was a vault. A room carved into the living rock, roughly 10 by 12 feet, with a poured concrete floor and a single steel shelf unit bolted to the far wall. Her father had sealed the seams with marine-grade caulk. The welds had held for decades. Everything inside was dry. Everything inside was deliberate. 3 military footlockers, olive drab, stenciled with numbers. A filing cabinet, gray steel, 4 drawers. A wooden crate. A small, fireproof safe. All of it arranged with the precision of a man who expected someone to find this and wanted them to understand that nothing here was accidental. Carl Henshaw built this on purpose, sealed it on purpose, flooded the shaft on purpose. He meant for someone to have to earn it. Dot knelt beside the first footlocker and unlatched it. Journals, Stacks of them. Composition notebooks, the black and white marbled kind you could buy at any five and dime, filled with her father's block handwriting. Dates on the spines ran from 1961 through 1987. 26 years. She pulled the first one free and opened it, and the spine cracked softly like it had been waiting. The first entry read, "Started the fund today. $14 from the paycheck. Mabel says I'm a fool. Maybe so. But somebody in this hollow is going to college or I'll die trying." $14 from a miner's paycheck. In 1961. Dot sat on the concrete floor. The cold came up through her jeans and she did not move. She began to read. And then, in the bottom of that first footlocker, wrapped in wax paper that had gone translucent with age, her fingers found something that was not a notebook. A photograph. A young man, maybe 30, standing on a porch she didn't recognize. He was holding a baby girl against his chest with both hands, the way you hold something so precious you're afraid your own heartbeat might bruise it. His face was fierce and tender and terrified all at once. The baby's fist was curled around his collar. Dot turned it over. Block letters. His handwriting. My Dot. June 14th, 1962. The day I became somebody. Dot was on her knees on the chamber floor, the brass compass in one hand, the photograph in the other. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes until the pressure steadied her. She stayed on that chamber floor for a long time. The brass compass in one hand, the photograph in the other, the heel of her palm still pressed hard against her eyes. And when the pressure finally steadied her, when the shaking in her wrists slowed to something she could hold still, Dot did the only thing that made sense. She started reading. Dot spent the next 3 days reading her father's journals in Chamber B, descending each morning at dawn and climbing out at dark, Wick lying at the top of the shaft watching the rope. 3 days, 14 notebooks, 26 years of a man's life written in block letters by lamplight in a room carved into the side of a mountain. And what those notebooks contained... I need you to sit with this because the math alone will take the air out of your chest. Carl Henshaw called it the fund. He started it in 1961 with $14 from his mining paycheck. $14. That's what he set aside the first time, and then he did it again 2 weeks later, and then again, and then again. 547 times across 26 years. Sometimes $8, sometimes $22, never more than 30. He kept the cash reserve in the mine itself, in this chamber he'd carved and sealed and told nobody about, and he dispersed it one family at a time, one crisis at a time, with the precision of a man who understood that poverty is not a condition. It's a clock, and the only thing that stops it is someone reaching in and buying you another hour. 237 families, that's the number. 237 separate acts of quiet generosity across 26 years in Harlan County, Kentucky, where quiet generosity could mean the difference between a kid staying in school and a kid going into the mines at 16. Grocery money during strikes, medical bills paid anonymously through the company store, school supplies purchased and left on porches before dawn, notebooks, pencils, a backpack once, a graphing calculator another time. A widow named Edith Sloan had her property taxes covered for 6 consecutive years, and Carl's journal entry for each payment was the same 4 words: Edith's land is safe. Transportation costs for 14 young people to attend community college or trade school, gas money, registration fees, 1 set of secondhand textbooks for a kid studying to be a welder. Total dispersed across 26 years, $52,341. Every name, every amount, every date. I want you to understand what $14 every 2 weeks means when you're a coal miner in Harlan County in 1961. That's the difference between boots that fit and boots that don't. That's the beer you don't drink. That's the coat you patch instead of replace. Carl Henshaw chose other people's children over his own comfort. 547 times, across 26 years, and he wrote every single one down in a composition notebook by lamplight in a room carved into the side of a mountain. And he never told anyone. Not his wife? Not his daughter? Nobody. The filing cabinet told the rest. Dot pulled the top drawer open on the second day. Alphabetical. A folder for each family Carl helped. Inside each folder, a record of what was given, when, and a brief note about the outcome. Not poetry, not sentiment, just facts, written the way a man writes when he believes the work matters more than the feeling. Barton, Lyle. $180 for truck repair, March 1974. Got the rig running. Lyle's hauling again. Combs, Della. $340 for surgery deposit, Baptist Hospital, September 1979. Della walked out on her own feet. 237 families, 237 folders, each one a life held together by a man who never said a word about it. Dot's fingers left dust trails on every tab as she moved through the alphabet. Her tortoiseshell reading glasses fogged twice from the closeness of the chamber. She wiped them on the hem of her cream thermal Henley and kept going. On the third day, she found the wooden crate. It sat behind the filing cabinet, pushed against the chamber wall, covered in a tarp that had gone stiff with age. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that smelled of linseed and something faintly like cedar, 16 U.S. savings bonds. Each one for $500, each one purchased between 1968 and 1986, and every single one made out in the name of Dorothy Henshaw. Total face value, $8,000. Matured value in 2024, $47,212. The paper shook in her hands. Her father bought one bond a year for 16 years, every birthday from the time she was 6 until the year before he died. He never gave them to her. He never mailed them. He sealed them in a mountain and trusted the mountain to hold them until she came. Dot sat on the cold chamber floor with those bonds fanned across her lap, her pale blue eyes moving over her own name printed in her father's handwriting 16 times, and her throat closed so tight she couldn't swallow. $47,000. She had 211 in a checking account. She'd been eating crackers and peanut butter for 9 days. And her father, the man she'd been told walked away, the man Jerry called your deadbeat old man, every time he wanted to win an argument, had been putting $500 a year into a mountain for her while he wore boots with cardboard in the soles. Then she found her own folder, bottom drawer, near the back. A tab in block letters, Dorothy Henshaw. Thicker than any other folder in the drawer. She pulled it out and felt the weight of it. Not heavy the way paper is heavy, heavy the way a life is heavy when someone has been carrying it for you without your knowledge for decades. She didn't open it yet. She carried it up the rope ladder one rung at a time, the folder pressed flat against her chest under the faded olive green field jacket. She set it on the kitchen table under the bare bulb light. She sat down. She put her hands flat on either side of it, the dented brass compass resting against her left knuckles where it had settled from her pocket. She didn't move for 11 minutes. Wick put his chin on her boot. She opened the folder at 4:17 in the morning. Wick hadn't moved from her boot. Inside were 26 birthday cards, one for every year of her life that Carl Henshaw had been alive after she was born. Each one store-bought, each one signed in the same block letters that labeled the filing cabinet. Each one sealed, stamped, addressed to Dorothy Henshaw at addresses she'd actually lived at. The apartment on Bledsoe Street, the duplex behind the tire shop in Maryville, the rental in Sevierville she'd shared with Jerry for 11 months before the marriage went permanent. He'd known where she was, every single year. He'd written the cards and never mailed them. She read them all. It took 40 minutes. Wick stayed on her boot. Then she closed the folder, set it on the kitchen table under the light, and pressed the heels of both hands against her eyes until the pressure steadied her. That was Tuesday. 3 weeks later, Travis Ridley came back. He pulled up the gravel switchback in a silver SUV, same charcoal overcoat, same slate blue shirt open at the collar, same slim black leather portfolio tucked under his left arm. But this time a second car followed, a dark sedan with Knoxville plates, and a woman in a navy suit who stepped out carrying a briefcase like it owed her money. Travis's lawyer. Because of course he brought a lawyer. A man like Travis Ridley doesn't hear that a pump is running on a dead man's mine and think about what it means. He thinks about what it's worth. He'd heard the pump was running. He'd heard something was found. Word travels in a hollow like smoke through a cracked window. You don't have to light the fire to smell it 3 ridges over. Travis walked up the repaired front step of the single wide and knocked twice. Easy, unhurried. That single deep dimple on his right cheek showing. Warm brown eyes doing their work. He smiled at Dot when she opened the door the way a man smiles at someone he's already decided is temporary. Here's what he put on the table. An updated offer. $18,000 for a 40-year mineral lease. His company handles all environmental compliance, all permitting, all liability. The lawyer laid it out page by page, crisp and practiced, pointing to clauses with a black pen. Travis leaned back against the kitchen counter, hands clasped in front of him, open palms, and said the thing he'd come to say. Dot, I'm not trying to take anything from you. I'm trying to give you a way out. You're sitting on $847 and a mountain of debt you haven't even found yet. This is real money for real problems. And here's the thing that should make you uncomfortable. He wasn't wrong. $847, a single wide with a patched roof, a mine shaft full of a dead man's journals. $18,000 would have been more money than Dot had seen in one place in 6 years. The lawyer's paperwork was immaculate. The terms were clean. Travis Ridley was not a cartoon. He was a man who understood leverage and genuinely believed he was being generous. Dot set the trust document on the table. The mineral rights were hers, free and clear, irrevocable. Carl Henshaw had filed it with the county in 1994, notarized and recorded, transferring all subsurface rights to a trust in Dorothy's name. The lawyer picked it up, read it twice, held it to the light like she was checking for forgery. She set it down and looked at Travis and gave him a small, tight nod. Valid. Travis tilted his head. The dimple faded. The mine's not for lease, Dot said. The land's not for sale. Those are my terms. 8 words. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't fold her arms. Her pale blue eyes held steady behind those tortoiseshell half-moon glasses, and her right hand rested on the dented brass compass in her left jacket pocket, and she waited. Travis asked why. And this is the one time, the only time in this whole story that Dot explains herself to anyone. She looked at Travis Ridley and said, "My father spent 26 years keeping this hollow alive, and nobody knew. He sealed everything he was into that shaft so I would find it. I'm not signing his name over to a company that would strip it for parts. That's the whole of it." The lawyer started to speak. Travis raised one hand and the lawyer stopped. "Now stay with me, because this is the part that costs." Travis's lawyer pointed out what any rational person would point out. The savings bonds alone, 16 of them, purchased 1 per year, matured and compounding, were worth $47,212. Dot could cash them, take the lease money on top, live comfortably for 2 years, maybe 3, start over somewhere warm. The math was simple, and the math was right. Dot told them she was using the bonds to establish the Carl Henshaw Community Fund, continuing her father's work. $47,212, when she had $847 to her name. Do that math. She chose to give away 56 times what she owned, for a man who gave away everything he had and never told a soul. The lawyer looked at Travis. Travis looked at Dot. Dot didn't argue. She didn't slam the door. She walked to the kitchen table, picked up the 1972 notebook, the one with the green canvas cover, water-stained at the corners, and held it out to Travis. "Page 114, she said. Travis took it. He opened it standing at the table, portfolio still tucked under his arm. He found page 114, and the portfolio slid off his arm and hit the linoleum with a flat slap he didn't seem to hear. Ridley, Dale, $220 for dental work, June 1972. Boy's got a good smile now. Dale Ridley, Travis's father. The man who'd kept the family together through the 70s, who'd kept working the quarry with a jaw that should have sidelined him for months. Carl Henshaw paid for his teeth. $220 so a young father could chew solid food and go back to work and raise a boy who'd grow up to wear a charcoal overcoat and carry a slim black leather portfolio and try to buy the mine where that mercy was recorded. Travis sat down slowly. He read for 2 hours. The lawyer waited in the doorway, then in the car. Dot made coffee and set a mug on the table and went outside with Wick. When she came back, Travis was gone from the kitchen. He was sitting alone on the concrete footing of the mine shaft railing. The black leather portfolio was closed on his lap. His lawyer was waiting in the sedan with the engine running. The hollow was quiet except for the pump's low hum and the wind moving through the bare oaks. The dimple on his right cheek was not showing. That's what it looks like when a man's whole story about himself stops being true. 3 months later, the single-wide trailer has a new propane tank and a repaired front step. A hand-painted sign by the gravel road reads, "Henshaw Community Fund. Walk-ins welcome." The light above the door is on, and I need you to understand something about that light. Dot bought the fixture at the hardware store in Everts for $11.40. She wired it herself. Walt held the ladder. It's a simple porch light, nothing fancy, 60-watt bulb behind a frosted glass shade, but it hasn't gone off once since she screwed it in. Not once. The first person to show up under that light was a woman named Della Combs, 79 years old, walking with a cane, carrying a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. She came up the gravel road on foot because she doesn't drive anymore, and she lives 2 miles down the hollow. 2 miles on a bad hip with a cane in one hand and a casserole in the other. Dot saw her through the window and met her at the step. Della set the dish down on the railing and said, "Your daddy paid for my surgery in '79, $340. I walked out of that hospital on my own feet because of Carl Henshaw. You tell me where to start." Dot pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes until the pressure steadied her. Then she picked up the casserole and said, "Come inside, coffee's on." 2 days later, a pickup truck pulled up with lumber stacked in the bed. Lyle Barton, mid-70s, white beard, hands like catcher's mitts. He didn't knock. He just started unloading 2x6s onto the grass. When Dot came out, he said, "Carl fixed my rig in '74, $180. I've been hauling ever since." He stacked the lumber, got back in his truck, and drove away. Came back Thursday with more. A younger woman left a box of school supplies on the step with a handwritten note tucked inside. "My mother was Annie Sturgill. She's in the book, 1983. Tell your daddy thank you." One by one, the names from the filing cabinet came back to life, each one carrying something: a tool, a dish, a stack of shingles, a jug of water, each one with a single sentence that connected them to a line in a dead man's careful handwriting. If you've made it this far, stay with me, because what happens next is the part I've been waiting to tell you. 2 weeks after Travis Ridley sat on that concrete footing with his whole story about himself burning down around him, a flatbed truck pulled up to the property. No driver Dot recognized, just a delivery manifest and $4,000 worth of lumber. Framing lumber, plywood, roofing material, a box of galvanized nails. The note was on company letterhead, clean black ink. For the fund office, no strings, T. Ridley. That's it. No phone call, no handshake, no slim black leather portfolio, no lawyer waiting in the car, just lumber. And the thing is, Travis Ridley could have come back with an injunction. He had the resources, he had the legal standing, he had every reason to be angry about being humiliated on a mountainside in Harlan County. But somewhere between page 114 of that 1972 notebook and the bottom of the mineshaft steps, Travis Ridley remembered that he used to have a good smile. His daddy had paid for it. Carl Henshaw had written it down. Dot never thanked him publicly, but the next time his car passed on the county road, the fund office was framed and roofed, and the lumber was holding. Walt was helping her frame the interior walls the afternoon she asked. She'd been holding the question for weeks, and it came out plain, the way everything came out of Dot. "What was he like?" Walt stopped, set his hammer on the sawhorse. His red bandana was folded in his left back pocket the way it always was. His gray-green eyes looked past her, past the wall studs, past the mountain. Carl died owing nothing to anyone and being owed by everyone. That was the richest a man could be. Then he picked the hammer back up and went back to work. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. The last person to arrive unannounced was not a neighbor. Jerry Henshaw drove down from Lexington on a Tuesday. Dot saw the car from the kitchen window. The same sedan, the same khaki trousers, the same gold wristwatch catching the light as he checked it twice before he even got out. He stood in the gravel driveway for a long time. Wick lifted his head from the porch but didn't bark. Jerry knocked. Dot opened the door but didn't step aside. He didn't ask to come in. His pale, hazel eyes behind those gold wire-rim aviator glasses were wet, and his fingers were moving the way they always moved, fidgeting with his watch, his cuff, the nothing in his hands. "I knew about the custody petition. Your mother told me about it in '84. I told you he never tried to see you because if you knew the truth, you would have gone back to him, and I couldn't look at that." Dot said nothing. She let the silence hold. The dented brass compass sat in her left jacket pocket, and her hand was around it, and the silence went on long enough that Jerry's eyes dropped to the gravel. "You should go, Jerry." He went. He checked his gold watch 3 times on the way to the car. Months passed. The fund office was finished. The logbook, a new one, green cover, Carl's original ledger preserved in a plastic sleeve on the shelf above it, was open on the desk. Wick slept by the propane heater, gray-muzzled and heavy-breathing and patient the way he had always been patient. Dot was 63 now. She had $1,100 in her checking account, and she managed the fund like her father did. Small amounts, precise records, no publicity. Her tortoiseshell half-moon reading glasses sat on her nose as she wrote entries in the same careful print her father had used. $120 for propane, Sturgill family, January. $85 for school supplies, Combs grandchildren, February. One evening in early March, a car pulled up the gravel road. Cracked taillight, rust along the rocker panels, engine knocking the way engines knock when they've been running on prayer for 6 months. A woman got out, early 20s, white, thin, holding a duffel bag with both hands like it was the only thing she owned. Because it was. She stood in the headlights looking at the sign. Dot opened the trailer door. The porch light caught her silver-gray hair, her pale blue eyes, the faded olive-green field jacket. "You eat yet?" The woman shook her head. "Come inside. There's soup on the stove. Home is not where you're born. It's where you stop running." The light is still on. The door is open. The compass is in the drawer by the door. And somewhere under a mountain in Harlan County, a sealed chamber stands dry and empty. Its purpose fulfilled, its promise kept. The logbook has new entries, the fund has new names, and Dot Henshaw, who walked away from 30 years of marriage with $2,341 and a hole full of water, is the richest woman on Pine Mountain. Not because of what she found, because of what she chose to keep going.